Seems they're gonna dig up my ground, and they say I can't be hanging around. Generations of sweat, tears and toil will just be dug up and buried in the soil. The decision's been made by the powers that be. It's all that's required to power the city. I used to feed the world, grew crops we could eat, but now if our devices are charged, we'll all be sweet. Seems they're gonna dig up my ground. They say I can't be hanging around. That's what I'm talking about, the green energy blues. They're gonna put all these high voltage lines right through my crops and beautiful vines. Gotta keep those city lights burning okay. With enough power we can turn night into day. It's really only a small price to pay for us progressives to have our way. It's as safe as houses, there's no risk to you. But who'll fight the fire when the locals won't man the crew? They're gonna put all these high voltage lines right through my crops and beautiful vines. Everyone's talking about it, the green energy blues. The towers have slowly risen up in the west. Free power for all, we're doing what's best. All the concrete's been poured, all the diesel's been burnt. So saving the planet is what we've learnt. It works just fine with the perfect wind. Too fast or too slow, then the troubles begin. The horizon our love has changed forever. When the blade stands still, it don't seem so clever. The towers have slowly risen up in the west. Free power for all, we're doing what's best. Yeah, right. Why aren't you talking about the green energy blues? But we ain't done yet. We're gonna harness the sun and cover the ground where the livestock once run. Panels on houses and buildings make sense, but covering up fertile ground seems like an offense. What would I know? My IQ's not that high. It's just my common sense keeps asking me why. Before you go off, I'm not a denier. I'm just worried we've all been bought by perpetual liars. But we ain't done yet. We're gonna harness the sun and cover the ground where the livestock once run. Please don't call them renewable farms. They're no more than factories causing community harm. The workers come in and after the job they'll go. Fund managers claim the subsidies and all the dough. We'll never see generational families work in the sun. The corporates unsell the project, the deal will be done. Farmers are the renewable OGs producing year after year, facing droughts, bushfires, floods and fears. Please don't call them renewable farms. They're no more than factories causing community harm. I'm over it, green energy blues. Well, this here song that I wrote's totally green. Not an amp in sight, not a lead to be seen. No power is required to sing this verse. I've been able to dodge the fossil fuel curse. The wind for the harp has come from my lungs. My fingers pick notes over the verses I've sung. Totally renewable, I can sing it again and not feel guilty about increasing heat trends. This here song that I wrote's totally green. Not an amp in sight, not a lead to be seen. I'm over it. Green energy blues.
Sunraysia, one of Australia's most significant food bowls. This region generates Australia's largest agricultural income. Most of the country's table grapes, almonds, summer fruits and citrus are grown here. We live in a dry place. The only reason food is grown here is because of the river. My name is Melinda Hinkson. I'm a social anthropologist and I've been researching the history and possible futures of farming in this region. This is the story of how we grow, sell and buy fresh food in Australia. It's a story of massive change over time and of the making and remaking of rural communities. It's a story of intensifying pressures on the people who grow our food and of increasing distance between people and the food grown in their neighbourhoods. For more than a century, Sunraysia has been a bold experiment in agricultural placemaking. Dried fruit grown on small blocks was the main driver of Sunraysia's economy. At its height, the region produced 100,000 tonnes of dried fruit a year for national and international markets. These days, dried fruit growers are lucky to produce 12,000 tonnes a year.
I'm just going to be making some oatmeal and sun muscat with our homegrown sun muscat. This is a favourite smoko recipe in our household. Because of the grade that we get with our quality, our fruit gets exported. Australians never get to actually eat my produce. I would have to change my contract to negotiate to have some brought back to me washed, to then package it up myself and sell it to locals if I wanted to do that.
I am a dried fruit grower, growing sultanas and currants at Redcliffs. I've been growing them nearly 50 years, I suppose. There's a bit of an art to it and a lot of work, but for various economic reasons, these days there's sort of more a third world industry. Costs are too high, returns are too low.
Corporate agriculture has rapidly expanded since the 1980s, and small family farms have struggled to compete. Across Sunraysia, a patchwork of dried-off blocks tells its own story. An industry and a rural community are undergoing dramatic change. More than a third of Mildura's growing areas are currently abandoned. It's creating what some locals refer to as a Swiss cheese landscape. At the same time, vast new areas of land and water allocation have been opened up to corporate agriculture. Driving around this region, the abandoned blocks pose a pressing question. If the utopian vision of Mildura's past was of an idyllic, small-scale farming community, what is its future?
This large-scale stuff is attractive to big investors, super funds, overseas corporations, all that sort of stuff. On one hand, you've got all these small properties dried off. On the other, you've got all these large-scale plantings which are all going to come online in another 3 or 4 years' time. They'll be at their maximum water usage. And then if we get a run of dry years, well, what's going to happen? There's not enough water in the Murray to supply all those almonds. The whole system is going to run into deficit. And not just for the almonds, but for all the other irrigators in the system as well. There's going to be real problems.
For our people, our life sustenance was the river. When the rivers are sick, then we're sick because we don't count ourselves as separate from the river and the things that live in there or the things that live up on the bank. This is a stretch of the river over on Barkindji country, obviously. When we come down here, we might find food, medicines. There's lots of different types of plants that we use. We've got ruby saltbush, there's lots of berries, quandong trees, native lemongrass, snotty gobbles, the mistletoe that grows off the trees. There's possum bread, it's the fungus that comes off the side of gum trees, but also medicines as well, medicines that we've used since time immemorial. Country's here to give. I wish people could just come and stand here and have a yarn like this and learn some stuff, and they might have a bit of respect.
We have so much farming land here, but so strangely, like all of it is exported out of the region. And then in the supermarkets, we get stuff from other areas of Australia or overseas. And so a lot of us are so far removed from that actual produce.
We grow mainly green beans, baby broccoli at Mandurah. We have an agent in every capital city, so we Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane and Perth. So I just book it in on the truck comes and picks it up from our shed and that's it. You know, we pack the pallets and away it goes. The local community do miss out because of that. Even though it's grown here, I can go to Melbourne or Adelaide and buy a better quality fruit and veg there because it's straight, that's where we send it straight to the market and there it is, you know, whereas here, where it's grown, we can't get that freshness. That's a big thing that we do miss out on.
My name is Deb Bogenhuber. I'm involved with the local food movement in Sunraysia. Living here in the middle of an agricultural region is what has really increased my interest in food systems. And that's where the Out of the Box project has come from. In Sunraysia, it's difficult to source local produce and it's difficult for small farmers to sell produce locally. Most of the growers here are at a scale where they're sending all of their produce off on trucks to market, and then some of that will come back to end up on supermarket shelves. So it's already several days old by the time we get access to it, and the food miles are huge. If we lost access to imported food in Mildura, it's estimated that we would run out of fresh food within 2 weeks. Out of the Box is small. It supplies around 65 households a week with fresh produce, and it diverts small amounts of locally grown veggies into restaurants and cafes before that produce is exported from the region. It's currently the only initiative that brings together local produce in Sunraysia and makes that produce locally accessible.
I think the pressures of price, the pressures of speed, the pressures of mass production has sent us in one direction where we've forgotten the value of real food and the value that it is for us as human beings in our survival. Right, really, it comes down to that. We are what we eat. Food is our medicine.
I guess it's a luxury in one way, but it shouldn't be a luxury because it's here. All the food is here. So people have access to it. They've just got to make the effort to go to the markets or order a box from out of the box, which once I think they're in the habit of that, it comes easily, and then they know that they're supporting local people and the money stays in our community, doesn't go to the supermarket giants.
Supermarkets are screwing growers in the sense of they create the monster that has to be fed, in the sense of making growers oversupply. So they'll support you how big you want to get, because they know that they're going to win from it, because there's limited places you can send produce. You have a limited shelf life. When it's ready, you have to pick it. So you create the monster where the bigger you are, you have to serve them. Obviously, then they can dictate price.
As a farmer, you are the lowest denominator in the ranks, but you take all the risk. You've spent that money, whether you sell your product or not, whether you get anything. We had a year that we nurtured our zucchinis, we loved our zucchinis. Got to the time we could sell it, and Queensland had got no rain, they'd been booming, and they were still booming. We were going to lose money to harvest, so we hoed them in. There was discussions about selling the property because we had to pay back the tens of thousands of dollars that we'd put in to plant the zucchinis and get them to the point that they could grow, and then we couldn't even harvest them. Coles and Woolies now control the market, and I'm so glad we turned around and moved into dried fruit.
The local food movement really has a strong focus on increasing the number of small-scale farms and providing the community with better access to local produce.
There used to be heaps of market gardens here, but not anymore. It is a pretty tough gig. You're battling with the weather, your bugs, weeds, seasons, markets. It's pretty full on. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, but if you can keep trying to make sure they don't, you might do all right. Before I discovered market gardening, I did think I had to buy a 30-acre farm where I'm shipping out pallets or whatever per week straight to the wholesaler. And then one day I was scrolling on YouTube, a thumbnail popped up, how to make $80,000 on a third of an acre, and I clicked on that, and away I went. I'd seen that you could grow vegetables in a small area and sell them directly to consumers and get full retail price and make a good living out of it. So that was that, and after I watched that video, I bought a little 2.5-acre place and started that journey. Selling local, you can skip a middleman, and then even going direct to wholesalers here, cafes, restaurants, and then direct to retail in the form of farmers markets or something like that. You're going to be pocketing more of the money instead of shipping your money out to freight companies and packaging companies and things like that. Going down the farmers market, it's a pretty good feeling when you get people saying, "Oh, I love your stuff, it lasts so long." So I'll go home feeling like I should get back into it because I've just had all this positive feedback.
I love the thought that we're actually feeding local families. That makes me really happy, and I think the relationship between us and those families is really important. Like, there's only one person between us with the box group, and for them to know, they follow us on social media, they can see what we're doing on the farm. They know exactly where their food's coming from. We do make sure that we pick our strawberries when they're ripe. We wait for the whole top to go red. That definitely leads to a nice tasting strawberry. The other thing is making sure that they haven't been watered before you pick them, or it hasn't rained, so they're not just full of water, which I know when you do buy some strawberries, you're like, there's no flavour in this, it just tastes like water. I grew up on a vineyard in Mildura. My parents are both born in Italy. My dad started his vineyard as a young man, and I used to help my dad put in the cucumbers and the watermelons. They were my two favourite things as a kid. Just the joy of watching a plant grow. And I think once that's in you from a child, you don't ever lose that. And that's what this feels like, you know, it's a life. It's not just a job.
I think the flaws in the corporate and go big method is that they actually don't create a big yield for the amount of acreage they're taking up. So we have 26 acres and we picked, I think it was just over 130 tonne, which was 5.1 tonnes to the acre. And the average for dried fruit is 2.5. I think by being out there and doing what we do, we're basically picking double the yield of someone that has double the land for half the work. So I think if you do it well, you can stay small.
They say that farming is in the blood. One of the most joyful parts of Sunraysia's local food system is Food Next Door Co-op. The co-op is owned by new migrant farmers from East Africa, and it supports them to farm on other people's land.
I came from Burundi. We moved to Mildura 2012. My parents are farmers. They feel like, how can we get somewhere to farm? For the next door, it's a community demonstration farm. It's fresh food from farm to home to tummy. And they taste differently from what is being in the fridge, in the supermarket. Plus, we would have a culture food like white eggplants, maize, fresh beans. It makes me feel I'm home.
I came here to Mildura through marriage, and I wasn't meant to be a cook. My in-laws wanted me to help manage the pub. And I said, but this pub hasn't got any of the local food. It's just an absurdity that we are serving shrimp salads and things that are not relatable to the place. And I decided to embark on this adventure of procuring local and to try to create a link between the local producers and the consumers. There was a strong Italian presence here, and the ingredients were perfect for the Italian cuisine. There's a bit of everything here, but just getting around getting it has always been an issue because things are grown to go to market. And then people here, 80% of the Mildura population that lives in town goes to the supermarket to get the stuff that went down to Melbourne and came back.
I do trips to Melbourne wholesale market twice a week. We go down with a truck, load up and come back.
Pretty good.
All right, yeah. They're going to send us half a dozen of these, please. 6 boxes.
Done.
Yep.
Poochie. What about some Red Bull or for the moment?
No, I've got some coming out of local. So
local ones,
we'll just use those ones. Yeah, I think we'll go 8 of these. Logistically, it's easier sometimes to buy it out of the wholesale market than it is to deal direct. We do support local growers out of the market. 314, yeah. Red semi. So logistically, it's cheaper for me to go and source that product out of the market when I only need maybe 10 kilos or 20 kilos of a product. It's cheaper for me to buy it out of the market and then put it onto a load with everything else than it is to go direct to that farmer locally. We sometimes freight stock down to the market, and sometimes we do bring a portion of that exact same stock back. It's a bit of a boomerang. I think coming from farming is a big thing. I'm very fortunate that I have come from farming and I can speak the lingo and understand. And sometimes my biggest saying is I wish I didn't understand the industry because I would be a lot more ruthless. When there is an oversupply of a certain product, you have to go with the market as much as possible, but also you want to support your growers, as in you want them to grow next year as well, because it's so easy when they're walking on a fine line that they'll pull a pin.
On the right here, we've got a vineyard of red wine grapes. It hasn't cropped for 2 years. You can see they're dead or they're dying. That's a graphic example of the Swiss cheese effect as properties cease to be irrigated. It's a big social change because people leave and as a rule, they don't come back. And so you haven't got that social capital that you once had. You haven't got the community that used to be there. You're very isolated. All your neighbours disappear along with their helping hand, along with their expertise and their availability. So, yeah, you definitely feel isolated and threatened.
The average age of an Australian farmer is now 63. Young people who want to try their luck at farming face high costs of land, infrastructure and production. They face high levels of risk, long working hours, and frequent low returns. But farmers are passionate people, and this place has always attracted people with big ideas and dogged determination to bring about change.
There's a lot of room for grassroots, locally focused industry approaches, especially of smaller producers. It could just be 4 or 5 growers coming together, setting up, it doesn't have to be a co-op, could be a partnership, just coming together to do these localized, small-scale farming initiatives. That willingness to come together to do things is the core of what makes regions tick. But at the same time, I believe government has the largest role to play for the type of economy we have. They set up the policies that lay the foundations for a sustainable food system. And it's government that then creates opportunities for investment to support agriculture at any level.
Initiatives to drive something local will balance out this illusion that all our wealth is created with export. There's a notion that exporting essentially water, because when you export food, you're exporting water, is the way to create wealth. But how long is the piece of string? This idea that it goes forever flies in the face of facts. I think that sooner or later, this will have to be not a matter of a choice. It'll have to become a necessity. I think, because look at what's happening with the weather, look at what we need to have strategies and local answers to potential future problems.
We tend to assume the arrangements that organise our food system are set in stone. But over the last century, there has been extraordinary change. People have driven that change, for better and for worse. Forecasts suggest that in a decade, irrigated horticulture won't be viable in its current scale. Over-extraction of river water and the impacts of climate change are compounding the challenges of growing food. The cooperatives that secured a quality and a fair price for small growers were a high watermark in Australia's farming history. In shocking contrast, we only need to look to the United States, where massive corporations now dominate the entire food system. It's a harrowing picture of where scaled-up agriculture is leading us. New partnerships, visionary ideas and political courage are needed to turn this situation around. We have a great example in Mildura. An inspired collaboration with researchers has brought landless migrant farmers together with owners of disused land to create a unique community farm.
I think we're so disconnected as a society in general, and I just think the building of community is such a huge part of knowing where our food comes from and being able to access local produce. It's something that I want for my children, to know and understand the food systems and where their food comes from, and being able to understand how to access good, healthy produce. Why else would you live somewhere like this if you still don't have that access?
Over the past 8 years, local food system work in Sunraysia has been driven at the community grassroots level. While these grassroots initiatives are great, they're not enough to be a solution on their own. To maintain and build a stronger local food system, it's now imperative for political courage, commitment and support at all levels of government.
It would require the support of local government, in my view. And local government is absent. It's the big absentee from this conversation. It could open up opportunities, not just for business, if you like, but for a lifestyle, for a culture in a general sense that would be inclusive, that would be exciting. Mildura has always been a frontier place where the impossible can be contemplated. If you don't start posing some sort of alternative to the status quo, you'll always end up with the status quo.
Farming is pulling us towards two sharply different futures. One sucks the lifeblood out of communities and exhausts the land. The pressures continue to intensify. But there is an alternative future. Growing food is reconnected to the health of soil, water, environments and people. It is up to all of us, governments, communities and producers, to decide which path we take.
No matter who you are, you'll find a place to belong here.
Join Lions and help shape a community we're proud to call home.
How do I check my skin? What am I looking for? And what do I do if I see a spot on my skin that I'm worried about? It's really important to check your skin and be aware of what's on your skin. You're the best judge, so you know what's on it and what's new or changing or different. We tell people to check their skin at the change of every season, so about 4 times a year, and make sure you do it systematically. So start at the places you can see and maybe ask a friend or someone at home to check your back, places you can't see. You're looking for things that stand out, that are different to their neighbours, that are growing or changing with time. And sometimes skin cancers will be tender or they'll be bleeding, but not always. So if there's something strange on your skin, make sure you go to your doctor and get it checked.
This is Genesis Novell, this property. We started it in 2014. We bought this property. I had a defence contract where I was designing vehicles for the defence on Project Overlander 121. With that, helped us create a new beginning, and that's what Genesis Novell means, is a new beginning. I asked my partner what she wanted to do after her diagnosis with ovary cancer. We thought it was fatal, going to be fatal for her. And she told me stories of going to the farm at Flagstone Creek with her uncles as a kid, and how she enjoyed spending time with the cattle. And she said, I would love to buy a small block of dirt and get some cows. Luck has it that, you know, after a few years of checking and a full hysterectomy, whilst there was some other medical issues in regards to, you know, fused organs and this and that, there was no cancer found, and Jodie was clear. When I turned 40, I'm 46 now. When I turned 40, I started the journey to try and utilise my previous industries to help other people and community service. So I started doing Cert 4 in mental health. I didn't know how it would go. So I started off just with the certificate course. Took me 2 years to go through and got that. And I was doing a lot of work on the Gold Coast and that, doing my work experience and that there. And then sort of COVID hit in 2020, as everyone knows, you know, and I was still very new to the industry, but working as a mental health practitioner and supporting people, that border closure created a lot of negative impacts on a lot of people, and there was not a lot I could do. I didn't have much of a voice, I didn't have much experience back then, but I could see the pain in people's eyes where they lived on one side of the border and their support was on the other, and they literally couldn't get it. And these people, you know, were suicidal or whatever, or you know, had mental challenges, and there was all sorts of family disputes and work disputes. People couldn't go to work, and there was all sorts of issues I was hearing just with this imaginary line that they decided to close everything down, you know. And I was trying my best, you know, on the Zoom calls and trying to support people as I could, and continued the journey to do my diploma in counselling. So I'd done that. That took me 2 years to get through. All the while learning about myself as well, because, you know, we're trying to redevelop our lives and develop industries, you know, with some fruit, vegetables and markets and ways of generating money on the property. One of the things, the conditions of the farm was, you know, we don't have cows for slaughter. They're not for meat. They're for pets, and that was one of the mad concepts that we're trying to work with, you know. And it's sort of a breakthrough industry that not many people were doing. It got to the point, like when we used to have yabbies in the dam, you know, we'd catch the yabbies and they'd get a name. If you had a name, you couldn't eat the yabbies, so we couldn't even, you know, eat the yabbies in our own dam. They were all called Blue Claw or Bluey or One Claw or, you know, all sorts of names like that. So trying to generate a small cattle herd, an income from a small cattle herd, was challenging, and, you know, we come up with the concept of, you know, using it for mental health purposes and creating better outcomes for people's overall health and well-being by just chilling with the cows. But even before COVID hit in 2019 was when this property started to be treated by the National Fire and Eradication Program. Back then it had a strategy where there was a radius around known nests. So there's a Gatton University campus up the road, and we got within a 5 or 8 kilometre radius of known nests that were found on the Gatton campus. So originally it was helicopters, and the helicopters were just relentless for months doing all this area. It was almost like a war zone. Over the property, over the dam, over the house, everywhere at the start in 2019, it was relentless, yeah, for months. For months, the whole area, up the hills, all these waterways come through here. One of the horses run through the fence and got injured, and one of the cattle got injured in the barbed wire fences because the noise from the helicopter was spooking them. I was very angry about the cattle, so I said, look, we can't have any low-flying activity on here. So they said, okay, that's all right, we'll get some motorbikes in. And so they come here with some motorbikes with spray bars. At the time it was a drought. There was no water in the dam at all, it was all drought. And I remember one of the times they come here, they were hooning, they were like cowboys, and they were using it like an endurance race or something, running up and down the dam walls there and up in the bed of the dam in the water. I asked them, I remember asking them at the time if it was safe, and, you know, they said, oh, don't worry about it, you know, it's harmless, you know, it's all safe and effective. And I feel bad that I didn't investigate it further back then, but, you know, I just trusted that, no, they're doing what they have to do, you know, and they went along. But that motorbike scenario also stressed out my cattle and my horses. I said, look, you can't do that. And I was fighting with them all the time, and my primary concern was the fact that they're stressing out the horses and stressing out the cattle, running them through the fences. We haven't got very good fences anyway, it's just all barbed wire. It's not like a big commercial place or anything. There's no wooden, you know, it's not safe fencing. It's just cheap fencing. And, you know, it's not designed to, you know, for spooked animals. These are quite handled everyday animals. They're not wild animals, and it doesn't need to be normally on normal circumstances. Anyway, and then next time they says, okay, we'll just come and hand treat it. I said, oh, that'd be better. But then they rocked up with like 20 or 30 people in a line in their high-vis shirts, and they just marching, two by two or whatever with their thing, and that just freaked the animals out even more, you know, and they just had no common sense at all with how to behave in the paddocks with the animals. And I said, look, this is not good enough. I said, you can't do it. And then I said to them, I said, look, it's not unreasonable for you to tell me what day you want to come. I said, treat 2 paddocks, and then I'll make sure there's no animals in them paddocks, and then come back, and then I'll swap the animals around so they're in them paddocks, and then come and treat the rest of the place, you know. And they said, oh yeah, we can do that, Trevor, that'd be no worries, you know. And they says, we'll come with 4 people, they said, we'll come with 4 people, and do 2 paddocks of your choosing, and then you can swap around the animals and then we'll come back later and do the rest, you know. And I said, because I said to them at the time, I said, look, we're not going to give you access to the back paddock because this is all waterways, you know, the whole lot's waterways. You know, if it rains here, that's all waterways, this is all waterways, all through here. It's all flows into the water, there's channels there. I know there's some dry channels there, but it's all, when it rains, it's all flows, you know. And I said, look, I'm not going to give you access to the waterways. It says on your permit you can't do that anyway. And they come in, they've done a couple of paddocks and then we moved around the animals. That was March 2024 when they come and treated 2 paddocks, and we had that agreement and they come and done that, and I hadn't heard anything back from them. I had my first calf die on the 30th of November 2023. We took it to the vet and they tested it for snake bites, and there was no snake bites, and tested it for anything, and you know, they couldn't find anything, and you know, and it was just sort of discussed about, you know, must have been some sort of toxin or liver problem is what was discussed, or whatever. About 6 months later, it was about the June the following year, 2024, when the second calf was born, and it had tight tendons, so it had feet, it was like on its tippy toes when it was walking, and that's the first time that we ever seen that as well. And we were sort of researching it, and they're saying, oh, sometimes a calf can grow too big for mum and it gets squashed up a bit and just needs to loosen up its tendons a bit, and talk to the vet, and there's some sort of antibiotics you can give it to loosen up its tendons, and we just treated it for that, you know, and didn't think much more of it. But it had the same symptoms and the same decline in cognitive ability over that 6-week period. So and it was euthanased on the 9th of June. I started to get really suspicious now about that's a second calf, and I started researching about it now, and I'd done some research that other people were saying that they had a greater miscarriage rate in their cattle where the treatment's been done. You know, people have been reporting on it, and I've seen some ads on LinkedIn, some commentary on LinkedIn saying similar things, and I started looking into it, and I asked the vet, when we euthanase the second one, can we get it tested? Because the first one, it was late at night, and the vet said, oh, our freezers are full, and there was it was on the weekend, and there was no opportunity to put it in the freezer or whatever and take it in on Monday. It always happens at in proper times, but this time we could plan it, and we planned it and euthanased it and took it straight down to USQ for a necropsy. And we got some preliminary data from the vet saying, oh, they're talking about toxic liver poisoning. So it's about this time I emailed the guy, because I told him, look, I'm not talking anymore because everything was words. I said, look, we've got to put everything in writing. I says, I have concerns. I've got some dead cows, some dead calves. I said, I've got some severe concerns, and until they're addressed, I said, I'm not letting you back on the property. And I could tell there was a serious problem because I was ghosted for 2 months after that. They never got back to me. They never answered me from that at all, and several emails went by unanswered. And as I'm getting some feedback from the vet talking about, you know, possibly liver toxic chemicals, and then when I got the necropsy report, that's when, you know, I started, you know, really seriously think, well, you know, what's going on here, you know, and really started to show some serious concern. Yeah. At the end of the day, I am responsible for the health and well-being of the animals that reside on this property. That is my job as a human, a custodian of the fine, magnificent creatures that reside here, and it's my responsibility to keep them safe, and I will continue to advocate for them to keep them safe. And I feel, even though it's not documented anywhere, that we have the right not to be exposed unnecessarily to toxic chemicals. I feel that I'm fighting for my choice not to expose my cattle to toxic chemicals. There's obviously something wrong. The scientific evidence that's available for anyone to view, peer-reviewed thing, is saying repeated excessive exposure to these toxic chemicals creates different effects depending on environmental conditions, depending on weather, depending on animal susceptibility, There's so many factors involved in this broad scale baiting. For example, this small acreage farm has a lot of stock on it per acre than what other places would have. And the research says that in areas of high concentrates of urea and manure, then the chemicals are going to last much longer in this environment than what it would on some residential block that doesn't have any cows staying on it. So it varies from site to site. So not considering, and also this site in the drought was specifically designed that all runoff from the rain goes to the dam, which is the cow's drinking water. So if it rains and there's still bait on the ground, it's going to end up in the cow's drinking water. So obviously that's a risk that I have that other people don't have, who don't have cattle or don't have livestock, but also don't have the full runoff that I've got into the dam. But generally, it doesn't matter where you bait. If it rains, it's going to wash into a waterway. They literally ghosted me for months, you know, and when they did talk to me, it was just all innuendo, and you could tell there was something seriously wrong with this program. Yeah.
Very dry. Hey, don't watch out, please watch out so you don't get hurt. You got
So I've been charged criminally as obstructing police, yeah. And that's a process that I have to continue going through to see the extreme behaviour that they went to force entry onto my property that didn't have fire ants, to make a stand about distributing chemicals on properties, 100% of properties, you know, in the eradication area, no matter what, no reasonable excuse considered. I presented a reasonable excuse, which included an open letter from Dr. Joshua King from the University of Central Florida that says prophylactic treatment of these chemicals in areas where there are no fire ants actually creates an environment that will hasten the distribution and spread of fire ants into that area due to the fact that these chemicals are non-target specific to fire ants. They'll kill any ant, and ants are the best defence against fire ant invasion. So by putting these chemicals out where there are no fire ants, they're killing the native ants, which are creating an environment that's going to help fire ant spread to this property. So you know, that's one of them, but also done the training with Dr. King as well, with my hot water machine that I bought because I wanted to be proactive with my biosecurity obligation, and I felt I needed to do everything I could to understand the biology of fire ants, understand how to treat them, come up with alternatives, because obviously I investigated the program. They didn't have any non-chemical alternatives, so I thought, you know, I'm going to investigate this and provide some alternative technologies for that. I've done the National Fire Ant Eradication Identification Certificates as well on the thing, and all that added substance to my reasonable excuse. I was meeting my biosecurity obligations, I was learning all about fire ants, I was providing alternatives, I was surveying my property. There's no fire ants here, there's no fire ants in the neighbouring properties anywhere, and you know, and it wasn't even considered. And the problem is the Department of Primary Industries or National Fire Ant Eradication Program feel that they're the ones that are judge, jury and executioner of the decision-making process, and they didn't even respond. They wouldn't even respond to a reasonable excuse that I presided on a stat deck that involved, at the time, that was 2 dead calves, plus all them other things. I sent it to them before Christmas in December, sent it to them in January, and sent it to them in February. Zero response at all. So I sent them the reasonable excuse with the stat deck and 3 notices that remained unanswered even to this day. And even when they come here on the 16th of April, that reasonable excuse that I presented to them remained unanswered. I still haven't got an answer on why that, whether, you know, what that result was. I didn't have a choice to appeal their decision. Only a court can decide what is reasonable and what is not reasonable. These guys are trying to bypass that whole process and make the decision themselves, because their process only can work, and it can't work anyway, but they must do 100% coverage 3 times a year if it's to work. And so they're denying people's medical certificates, they're denying people's, you know, allergies, that people are getting rashes from the chemicals, respiratory problems. There's people that are on severe you know, lung transplant waiting lists that are impacted from the dust of the aerial spraying that they're ignoring. And kids with allergic reactions to the stuff that are getting rashes all over their face that are being ignored. So there's not a single thing that they can accept, because if there's one gap in their plan for their strategy to even come close to working, they must you know, kill off every single ant and kill off everything in that eradication program. But as you can see, eradication was impossible when they first discovered them in 2001, and it remains impossible now with probably a million hectares of land in southeast Queensland invaded by fire ants. You know, so yeah.